Okay, this is what she had on the website, and I'll read it to you just so I can read it. Okay, so here we go. Apparently, this is a quote from Mr. Fuller. He said this: "We must do away with the absolutely specious notion that everybody has to learn a living. It's a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everyone has to be employed at some kind of drudgery because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. So we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. The true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living." If this is not the most ridiculous, it's so bizarre that I don't really know if I can credit him with it. It's probably just trolling or something. Where do we start with this? I mean, where do you start? Well, we'll start at the beginning. That's where we'll start. So what is this thing really saying? Okay, it's the idea that people have to earn a living is specious. It's a false premise. It doesn't exist. So what does that mean? If everybody should be able to go home, you say at the end, go back to school and think about the things you were thinking about before you had to learn a living. And by the way, Bucky, if this is in fact your name, don't you find it a little telling that your closing sentence is to tell people to go back to school and think about what they were thinking before the world had to impact them? It's kind of like saying, well, what they were thinking about My Little Pony, you know? That's what they were thinking about, Bucky. They were thinking about Call of Duty, and they were thinking about a bunch of other things. They're thinking about just being able to sit on the couch for the rest of their lives. And not talking about everybody, obviously, but we're talking about the kind of people that use this on Facebook to justify the fact that it's an offense and it should be illegal, that they have to get out and get a job. So he says, it's a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. Okay, Bucky, what does that look like? I'm listening, because if it's 1 in 10,000 of us, let me see. 1,000 is a tenth of that. 100 is a tenth of that. And 1 is a tenth of that. So 300 million down to 30 million, down to 3 million. So, according to this, there should be 3 million people who are making technological breakthroughs every day that can support the rest. Well, here's a technological breakthrough for you, Bucky. Here's a technological breakthrough for you. It's called the iPhone. Ta-da! See, there it is. And it is perhaps the greatest technological breakthrough. It's certainly the greatest technological breakthrough of my life. The idea that somebody said something about, there goes Carla, hi, everybody's waving, except they're just waving in the past or in the future. Somebody said, some comedian, I wish I knew his name, said that he's getting to the point where a telephone is just an app on his phone that he doesn't use very often, the actual telephone part. Nobody likes to talk on the phone anymore. So, but Bucky, let's follow your premise here. This ability that I have with this device means that I always know where I am. I never get lost. It means I have full access to everything that man's ever thought of. If it's been written down, I can get to it. If it's ever been photographed, I can get to it. It is the single greatest breakthrough of all time, and you're going to have to explain to me how that means that people can sit home and not work. It certainly makes sitting home and not working a lot more interesting than it used to be. But how does that technological breakthrough support all the rest of us? How can 1 in 10,000 people, 3 million people, 300,000 people, whatever number you want, how can they come up with technological breakthroughs that support all the rest of us? If I come up with a technological breakthrough in the iPhone, it doesn't mean I don't have to work, and it doesn't mean nobody else has to work either. People still have to be fed, and you still have to have an economy, because idiots like this genius have this idea that an economy should just be, just do what you want to do, and they don't understand that there's more to life than actually just getting food, although you have to get food. we've done this before. But Bucky, here's the deal. If I want to have some food on my table, you think I just have to go and persuade the farmer to give up some of it. But the farmer gives up his food, and then the farmer gets handed off to a truck that drives it into market. Somebody has to refine the gasoline for that truck. Somebody has to go out and drill the oil for the gasoline. Somebody has to make the rubber that's on the tires. Somebody has to stitch together the upholstery. Somebody has to paint the truck, and somebody has to put a license plate on it. Somebody has to follow which license plate it is. Somebody has to stay on the side of the road to make sure that the truck's not going too fast. Somebody has to machine the hundreds of parts that are moving in the engine, and there's thousands of people that work on every one of those things. Thousands of people work on a pencil, for God's sakes, and something like one truck is a practical army. Then they have to drive it down roads that have to be cleared, and they have to be graded, and they have to be paved, and then they have to be maintained, and get into the city where there has to be electric lights and traffic lights and all the rest of it. This is just to get your food to the table. This is just to do the one simple thing, the one simple essential thing, get food to the table. Same thing for water, by the way, at least out here. It's not just out here, it's everywhere. How many people watching the show drink water from a stream out back of their house? None. It's nice to have a clean water stream out back of their house, but if it's not none, then you have my deepest admiration and envy. So just getting water to people in Los Angeles is an enormous technological deal that requires huge amounts of effort and work and energy and all the rest. It has to come from someplace. So why on earth could you say something that stupid? He sounds like what he's trying to say is that one day we're going to invent a robot that's going to do all of our work for us. And I think he really thinks that. He thinks by the way, it's a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough. 1 in 10,000 of us? The iPhone is not 1 in 10,000. This isn't one person's. One person didn't create this. This was created. It is absolutely true that one person had the vision for it. That is 100% true. Absolutely true. But to create it, I'm not saying that Steve Jobs didn't build that. I'm saying Apple built that. But in order to build this, you have to mine the metal, and you have to process the glass, and you have to make the silicon chips, and you have to have hundreds of people, thousands and thousands of people independently designing apps. So here's a technological breakthrough that's not supporting anybody. This doesn't feed me. It doesn't turn on the power. It doesn't run my life. It doesn't get me water. It doesn't put shampoo on the shelves in the bathroom. And it's such a stupid thing to say, and it's so obvious why some people would quote this and put it on their Facebook page. Basically, what he's saying is, super genius Buckminster Fuller said that it's ridiculous that you have to go and work for a living. And here's another thing. He says, we keep inventing jobs. Get that? We're inventing jobs. We're not fulfilling jobs. We're not fulfilling need. We're inventing jobs. The youth of today are absolutely right in recognizing this nonsense of earning a living. It's nonsense to earn a living. Here, I'll give it back to you here. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everyone has to be employed at some kind of drudgery. Who said drudgery? Because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. Getting a job and working doesn't justify your right to exist. Everybody has a right to exist. It's how you exist. Getting a job is how you exist. It's not justifying your right. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go to work so that I'm worthy of food. Of course you're worthy of food. But who's going to get it? How are you going to get it there? You've got to go and get it. And you've got to do the same thing for energy. You have to do the same thing for medicine and all the rest of it. And then he goes on to say we have inspectors of inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors. Now, on this particular point, I agree with him, because basically what he's doing is he is saying that the entire economy, the entire workforce is out there enforcing regulations that are written by people like this. This is, in fact, the cancer on a productive society, and it is the only thing that you can do that really genuinely doesn't do an awful lot of wealth creation. Some inspection is good, obviously, but this kind of micro management of everything, the whole package. And then I saw the video after that because it was on the same page, and it just made me realize, my God, it is just amazing what some people believe. They had another one of these F-bomb things, and it was F-word assault rifles. You know, ban assault rifles, F-word assault rifles. And it was warned by authentic gay people from authentic Orlando, some of whom had been in the nightclub when the shooting was going on, and one of whom lost a friend in there. And that's fine, and I'm sorry you lost a friend. But this is the other thing about the left that I cannot process. They seem to think that if you made guns like that illegal, then no one would have them. And they seem to think that it's a problem of education. In that video I was talking about with the little 6-year-old girls using the most foul language possible, not just the F word either, the most foul language and the most vile ideas possible. They were talking about the rape lie about 1 in every 5 women going to college gets raped. It's just not even, it's nothing close to that. But basically what they're saying is, so stop doing it. Why don't you stop doing it? If we could just raise awareness of it. This is the thing. They actually genuinely believe that the problem with rape is a problem of insufficient education. If somebody would simply explain to the rapist that it's not the right thing to do, that it's bad, then we won't have any rape anymore. Because then they'll know, then they'll be enlightened liberals just like they are. Once they understand that it's bad, then they won't do it anymore. My contention is they already know that it's bad, and they don't care about what you're going to say or do about it. If you're going to go and shoot up a nightclub in Orlando, and you're prepared to kill 50 people before you go down in a blaze of glory, I don't imagine you're going to be too concerned about parking in a handicap spot, or parking in the red zone, or parking in a no parking area. I don't think you're going to care if you're determined to go out and murder people with a gun or a truck or a pressure cooker or knives or clubs or whatever. Clubs and knives kill 4 or 5 times as many people as assault rifles, and bare hands and feet do more than semi-automatic rifles. But they don't. It's simple. I just have to have them. Sometimes when you're arguing with people like this, it's like when you're talking with people who are like about the whole chemtrails thing, or the moon landing didn't happen, or any of this stuff. When you have to explain to people, when you're fighting that kind of a theory of things, you can say all the sensible things in the world you want, and they're not going to listen to you. They don't understand. So what you have to do in a case like that is you have to make them explain their theory. Make them explain their theory, how it works. And then you've actually got them. You believe in the Loch Ness Monster? I do. Okay. What evidence do you have of this? Well, there's been all these photographs that have been taken over the years, and there's a wake, and there's a 64 picture of got a good look at its neck, and there's a couple of bumps in the water taken in 1972, and so on and so on. And say, okay, so what do you think it is? Oh, it's one of those dinosaurs. Okay, it's a plesiosaur. Yeah, it's a plesiosaur, which is an air-breathing dinosaur, right? Yes. And since it breathes air, it has to come to the surface 10 times an hour, maybe more, right? It has to breathe, right? It has to come up for air, right? The entire surface of Loch Ness is watched by hundreds of these lunatics. We would see as much of the Loch Ness Monster as we see of whales, because whales have to come up and breathe too, and whales are real. So make them explain it. Make them explain their theory. I had got into a discussion with somebody about chemtrails, and I made her explain how it worked. She really believes that people are spraying poison out of jetliners in these persistent contrails up there, and that there's this giant conspiracy to poison people. Okay, explain to me how that works. This is going to the banning guns issue. It's not just off in the wild here. It's the same thing for banning guns. So just explain to me how the chemtrails things work. What do you mean? Well, how does it happen? Well, the jets are up there. You can see them up there, and they're squirting these chemicals up there. And contrails didn't look like that before. Now they're much more. They stay up forever. It's obviously poison. There are chemicals in them. It's a chemtrail. Okay. Well, how are they sprayed? Well, they're sprayed out of airplanes. Well, there's a lot of contrails up there. On some days, you can see hundreds of contrails up there. So are these military airplanes, or are they civilian airplanes? Because if they're military airplanes, you've got a problem, because there's hundreds of people like me, thousands, tens of thousands of people on any given day looking out the window, and I'll often see a Delta jet go the other direction or whatever. So if there's a big black jet up there doing this, That's a problem. Finding large numbers of them are a problem. And even if you take away the whole military civilian aspect of it, she said, no, it's commercial jetliners. I said, okay, well, since I happen to be a pilot, I'll tell you something that's demonstrably true. You can prove it to yourself anytime you want to, just at the airport earlier. Pilot on a commercial jetliner walks around his airplane, either the pilot or co-pilot, before every flight, not at the beginning of every day, but before every flight. They're looking for things that are loose. They're looking for panels that might be coming loose, or some things that didn't look like they were fully retracted, or cracks in metal or anything like that. They're doing their job. And it seems odd to me that given 40,000 flights a day in America and hundreds of thousands of pilots, that not one of them has ever noticed the poison nozzles on the jet. It seems a bit odd to me. And it seems a bit odd to me that the maintenance guys who work on these jet engines haven't seen them either. And you know what else seems odd to me? If the purpose is spraying these chemicals up there like a crop duster, I find it very odd that that could be the case, because in order to get the airplane to take off, they have to have a very, very concise sense of the weight of the aircraft and the general balance of the aircraft. So if you're carrying along hundreds or thousands of pounds of poison, and you're going to put it in the airplane someplace, then the airplane is not going to take off when it should take off, because it's thousands of pounds heavier than the pilots know it to be. She said, well, the pilots are all in on it. I'm not making this up. I said, okay, all right, that's interesting. So 100,000 pilots or more, when you think about all the ones who've already retired and so on, 300,000 pilots are in on this? Yes. And not one of these people who's been sent up to murder everybody in America, including their own children, not one person has said, boy, I got a funny feeling this isn't right. Well, they pay them a big amount of money, and they threaten their families. If they don't do it, they'll be killed. This person is dead serious. I mean, she's dead serious. And then it became, okay, so make sure I get this straight. You've got a guy who's got a family of 4. He's making pretty good money as it is, used to be anyway. A couple $100,000 a year for a senior captain. I don't know if it's that anymore, but it used to be. And so basically hundreds of thousands of these people, former veterans, many of them, if not most of them, former Air Force pilots who risk their lives to defend this country, are now being paid large sums of money, which they don't seem to be spending, because I know a lot of commercial pilots, they don't look like they're spending large sums of money. And if you can't spend it, what's the point of it? To go fly over the country and spread poison on everybody, including their own children. And to do what? What does this poison do? Is it designed to kill us? Because if it was designed to kill us, spraying it up at 38,000 feet is not the way to do it. If you want to simply gas everybody in the country, you might want to do that at lower level. If it turns out that no, it takes a while for the chemicals to come down and kill people, well, then it comes down and kills the people that are doing it too, right? I mean, nobody's wandering around with gas masks on. You don't see the Koch brothers going from the limousine to the house with gas masks on to protect themselves from this poison that presumably they've paid to put up there. And you just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on, and they simply just keep backpedaling because they can't get there. They have an emotional requirement to believe in it. It's got nothing to do with what actually happens. It's an emotional requirement. And then you close this argument by saying, it could be all of those things, hundreds of thousands of guys and mechanics and airplanes and murder and kidnapping and extortion and assassination and threats, and it could be all of those things, and it actually can't be, because it can't be. It's physically impossible. On the other hand, it is true that the contrails don't look the way they did prior to 15, 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more. So that's the proof. The proof is that there are contrails that are hanging around longer than they used to. That's the proof that you're using. That's the reason that you believe this boatload of nonsense. Uh-huh. How do you explain it then? How do you explain the fact that those contrails are up there when they weren't up there all the time before? I say, well, I explain it like this. Jet engine is an interesting device. There are many different flavors of jet engines. They're all considered gas turbine engines. That's probably the best way to think of them. First generation of jets, the 707, the early 720s, in fact, all 727s, early 737s. You see one of the early ones, they've got the narrow little tubes underneath the wings, not the big round fans, the narrow little tubes like on the back of a 727 or underneath the wings of a DC-8 or a 707. And these are called, they're basically called true jets. They're turboprop, they're just turbojets. So basically, on a jet like that, on the old style jet models, the air was sucked into the front of the jet, it was compressed, and then they squirted fuel on it, and this compressed air has a lot of oxygen in it, so when they squirt fuel on it and ignite it, it expands very rapidly. It can't go out the front, it can only go out the back. That provides a thrust in the equal opposite direction, and as the hot gases are coming out, it turns a turbine on the way out that keeps the turbine on the way in going. But basically, on all the jets, right up until about the 747, all the old jets, all of the air that touched the jet engine went through the jet engine. All of it went through the middle of it. And then somebody realized, you know what, we can get a jet a lot more efficient and quieter too, a lot more efficient. If instead of having all of the air go through this narrow bypass jet, instead of having all the air go through this drinking straw basically, how about if we do this? How about we keep that kind of jet? Okay, we keep a jet that's taking air through it, because that's what a jet does. Takes air on one side, compresses it, squirts fuel on it, ignites it, and lets it come out the back end. But instead of that being the total amount of thrust, what if we hook this thing up to either a propeller, in which case you have a turboprop engine, or what if we were to hook it up to a turbine in the front that was much bigger than the jet engine? And essentially, when you see the fans, when you get on an airplane, you see these little turbine blades, and basically, essentially, you're flying in an airplane that's a propeller airplane with 30 or 40 or 50 blades per side. Now what happens? Well, what happens now is, yes, it's true, some air goes through the engine. This volume of air that used to go through engines is microscopic compared to this. Now a little bit of air goes through the engine, but the huge majority of the thrust is air being generated by the fan, and the fan flows outside of the jet engine, and the amount of volume of air is enormously higher. It's enormously higher. And it's heated from the inside. Contrails are a result of condensation turning into ice crystals. So we call these new engines high bypass engines. And the reason we call them high bypass engines is because a lot of air that wasn't moving before is now moving through the nacelles, but not through the jet. But it's coming out on the backside. It is surrounding the hot gas. And so the volume of crystallized water vapor up there is much higher than it used to be. And when you're dealing with ice crystals, the thicker the ice is, the longer it takes to melt. Any other questions I can help you with? They don't. See, this is the thing. I could have this conversation with them and show them all of this, and it wouldn't make any difference, because it's not rational. It's a psychological problem. It's a mental illness. This is the only way to describe it. It's a mental illness for people that have to believe something that is just patently not true. We did Facebook Live a couple days ago, Stephen Scott and I, and somebody said, "So you actually believe we went into space?" It's a kind of a refreshing change, because normally we get, "You actually believe we went to the moon?" Yes, I do actually believe we went into space. How can you possibly believe such a thing? I could do this all night, you know. One of the reasons I believe we went into space was because when I was 11, when I was 11 years old, I sat on the roof of my dad's station wagon in Satellite Beach, Florida, and I watched Apollo 13 go off that pad and into the sky. I watched it happen. It wasn't very big. It was that big on the horizon, and when that thing lit up, its spark was so bright, and it seemed like minutes before the hit you, and when it hit you, you could feel it in your chest. And so I saw this giant rocket go up into the air. So if you're saying we haven't been to space, why do we need that big a rocket? Where did these rockets go? Did they all just go splash in the ocean? I think somebody would have seen that. And if we're lying to the American people and we hate the Russians so much, or if the Russians are lying to the Russian people and we hate the Russians so much, then how come we don't just rat them out? It's just so much wrong with this that you just have to start to really wonder about their sanity. You genuinely do. And it's the exact same thing with this ban assault rifles or ban guns. Let's say that they had the authority, the legal authority. Let's just say they did it the right way, the only honest way there is. Let's say there were enough votes to repeal the Second Amendment. The 28th Amendment says the Second Amendment to the Constitution is hereby repealed, and nobody can own guns anymore, and all guns are banned. And furthermore, let's give them everything they want. Not only are all guns banned, but all citizens are required to turn in their weapons, and if they don't, it's a felony. Now, let's just hold on to that thought for a second, because there's 300 million guns out there, or more, 400, 450, something like that. Let's give them everything they want. Let's give the F assault rifle, what do you call these people? Let's give them everything they want legally. Guns are banned. All guns are banned. Not just assault rifles. All guns are, they're not only not selling them anymore, they're banned. And if you have them, you have to turn them in. So, what happens then? Honest people, honest citizens who obey the law, some large numbers of them, some significant percentage of them, will turn the guns in because they're law-abiding citizens. Most of the guns won't be turned in because the people who have the guns legally understand exactly what's going on there. They understand that this is exactly why they want the guns off the street. It's not to protect us against deer. It's to protect us against the government. But let's just say that half of the people in the country, let's just say that half of them turn the guns in. It's not going to be anything like that, but let's just say. So, what guns have been taken? What do you have in your giant gun warehouse now that you've gotten everything you wanted legally? What have you got in there? You've got the firearms of people who follow the law, and the reason we know they're following the law is because they just obeyed the law in order to turn the guns in. So, everybody with their own guns who they've been using, private citizens who used to go out there and practice shoot or hunt or whatever, now you've got their guns. But you know whose guns you don't have? You don't have the guns of murderers and rapists and robbers. That's why. Or terrorists, for that matter. You know why? Because if you're ready to break the law against murder, then breaking the law against turning your gun in is probably not going to deter you all that much. Are you really that stupid? Honestly, really. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They absolutely are. And that's why when they want it in Texas, they did this. We did a right angle segment for members on this. They had a big protest, typical of left-wingers, is all about, 11-year-old kind of sexual crudity, the kind of thing that if you said, at a party would get you a lot of attention from the adults. And they say we need to ban guns from campus. And the thing that just stops me, and I never hear anybody arguing this, by the way, because we are the party that just never can figure out how to explain all the things we know to be true. What makes you think that a person that's ready to commit mass murder, that a person has got it in them and is geared up and ready to go, and they're ready to shoot innocent people, little children, in the face, what makes you think that somebody like that is going to stop doing that because he's realized that it's against the law? And how idiotic do you have to be to think that that they don't realize that it's against the law to go in and murder people? So you're going to put a sign up now that says no guns on campus? What's that going to do? It's going to mean that the only people that aren't going to have guns on campus are the people that obey the law. And those are the only people that could ever save you. And if you don't believe me, you just go look at the first mass shooting in the University of Texas, same place, where I'll never remember his name. It's not Mark David Chapman. That's the guy who shot Lennon. It's somebody. Anyway, it was the first mass shooter. He goes up to the top of the bell tower at the University of Texas, and he's a very good shot, and he's got a high-powered rifle. I think it was I don't know, 30-06, something like that. Anyway, he's got something with some real power to it, a hunting rifle with a scope, and he's up there and he's just picking people off, and he kills 20 people. He's just a deadly shot. Well, what happens? This is back in 63, 64, something like that. What happened is everybody starts screaming and running around, and the professors, yes, I'm talking about university professors, run out to their cars, and they open up their trunks, and they get out their hunting rifles, which they have with them all the time at school. And maybe some kids from the shooting club go and get some of their guns, and they return fire on this guy. And once people started shooting back, no one else was killed. Nowadays, those professors would be frantically running around looking for a Kinko's so that they could mass produce flyers saying shooting people is wrong. And once the guy up there realized that, once he read the pamphlet, once it occurred to him that shooting people was wrong, he'd stop. Same way that a guy who's about to rape a woman, and do the most horrible thing to her, short of killing her, and in many cases probably worse than killing her. This guy doesn't know this is wrong. That's why we have to educate people about rape. Is that what you're trying to say? I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. There's that great line in Lord of the Rings. What can one man do against such relentless hate? And sometimes it's like, what can one person do against such relentless stupidity? But anyway, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about before we get going. It's got a little time tonight and didn't take too many questions.